Welcome to the September edition of At Home with ADTS, a monthly program about the supports and services offered by Aging, Disability, and Transit Services of Rockingham County. I'm Ashley Cooper, Director of Adult Day Services here at ADTS. ADTS has been in operation in Rockingham County since 1973. Formerly known as the Council on Aging, our goal is to assist and link senior adults, people with disabilities, and their families with information, opportunities, and services that promote and enhance quality of life, as well as working to meet the local transportation needs of Rockingham County residents. As always, we'd like to start our show by thanking our local businesses that have supported ADTS through our Community Partners Program. As state and federal funding remains stagnant, these local businesses are helping expand our ability to meet the ever-growing needs in the community. Thank you to Pelham Transportation, Carolina Apothecary, Wells Fargo, Christopher and Dana Reed's Foundation, Reedsville Area Foundation, Home Trust Bank, CJ Medical, Rockingham County Community Foundation, the North Carolina and Rockingham County Arts Council, Sparks Oil, Church of the Epiphany, Piedmont Natural Gas, Eden Rotary, Reedsville Rotary, Woodmont United Methodist Church, and Plaza Mini Storage, Wilkerson Funeral Home, BB&T, Annie Penn Cone Health, JDK Automotive. Thank you for your continued support. We would like to also give a special thank you to the United Way of Rockingham County for their long time and generous support of our program, Meals on Wheels. United Way of Rockingham County brings together local people to help raise local dollars to meet local needs, and we thank you and we thank them very much for their contribution. Today, we have Angie Swann-Jones, but I'm going to call her Angie. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. Just to give a brief introduction of you, Angie is a project manager, trainer and facilitator, infopreneur, blogger, project and lead AARP volunteer, cancer survivor, and I love this one, forever a caregiver. She is a committed AARP volunteer who serves others through facilitation of various AARP programs, including caregiving, Fraud Watch Network and technology for senior centers, churches and other nonprofit organizations in the Triad, as well as event coordinator for AARP exhibits, including movies for grown-ups. She's a member of the Volunteer Lead Trainer Network for AARP National and a member of the Portal Volunteer Engagement Team for AARP North Carolina. These positions include traveling throughout the Triad in the state of North Carolina. She's an avid reader, loves journaling and blogging, canning, sewing, and learning how to upholster. You sound like a Renaissance woman. And I'm so glad you're here today.
And I'm glad to be here.
Yes. I'll get to why you're here. Well, I was excited to have you. But before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about what AARP is?
AARP is an organization that was started in 1958 by Ethel Percy Andrus. And Dr. Andrus started that organization because she was concerned about retired personnel, school personnel, starting that and moving forward. The mission and vision of AARP is a society in which everyone ages with dignity and purpose, and in which AARP helps people to fulfill their goals and their dreams. That's the vision. The mission is that AARP is dedicated to enhancing the quality of life for all as we age. We've led positive social changes and delivered value to members through advocacy, service, and information.
Wonderful.
Yes.
I know that they do a lot for individuals who are retired, but for anybody really. And one of the services or supports they provide is to caregivers. What are some ways that AARP supports caregivers?
AARP, one of the things that AARP, which is near and dear to me, the caregiving part is near and dear to me, but AARP provides information. I talked about being an entrepreneur. It provides information on caregiving resources, just in terms of how you can care for your caregiver, but also how you can be cared for. Providing that information through various vehicles. We give information in our magazines, emails, and all kinds of telecommunications and telethons. So a lot of information that we provide for caregivers and for those that are being cared for.
Right, and I know on their website they have a whole section that's just dedicated to caregivers and just information galore that I always find helpful, and I referred my caregivers to as well. And so what I think is interesting is people define caregiver differently. How would you define caregiver?
I define caregiver as an individual that cares for a spouse, for a loved one, for be it a spouse, a partner. A loved one could very well be a friend or a neighbor or a church member, but cares for an individual who is in need and needs some support and some help.
Yeah.
And then it depends on every individual as to the amount of that caregiving that's provided.
Very true. And I think a lot of times we find our caregivers through informal supports. So I always jokingly say that if you know when their appointments are and what medications they take, even regardless if you're a neighbor or a friend, you're a caregiver.
You're a caregiver.
So it comes in many different forms. Not everybody is full on taking care of mom and dad as a caregiver. It could be really anybody who knows something about somebody who's in need. So I love that, because I think a lot of times people don't consider themselves caregivers, which is why what we're going to talk about, I think, is really important, because we're going to talk about Prepare to Care workshop that we're having next Friday, as a matter of fact, the 27th, and how if they care for anybody, if they know a lot about somebody who's in need, then they might want to think about taking this class or this workshop. So tell us a little bit about Prepare to Care.
Prepare to Care is a workshop that was developed by AARP, and it actually is just what it's saying, is to prepare to be cared for. A lot of people say, well, I'm prepared, when the end comes, and I have my funeral arrangements and all that, but Prepare to Care is really to be prepared to care should you need someone to care for you. For example, I broke my foot this year, and I needed to be prepared to have someone to come in and help me, because I do live alone now, and to help me. So being prepared, knowing, it starts with a conversation, knowing who you can call to help you should you need some help. We talk through that process, through that workshop, we talk about a lot of the things that you can do and the team that you can build to help you in being cared for.
So you recommend this workshop not only for people who are caregivers, but also for an individual who might need caregiving at some point.
Recommend this, and I joke about the fact that I do this course. I've done this course with people who are over 60 years old, and those individuals say, my children don't want to talk about it. And then I do it with people who are under 50 years old, and they say, my parents don't want to talk about it. But as parents, as individuals, we need to have that information prepared, documented, and available, so that should you need someone to help you, that then you know how to reach to get that information, and you've given some thought to it, and you don't want to wait until it's too late. You want that person who's been cared for to be a part of making the decisions that are made.
Right, because too often we wait till there's a crisis.
Right.
Because that's a good time to have the conversation. I say sarcastically.
Yes.
But that's often when people leave it to have that conversation, and then you kind of jump in with 2 feet, and then it's just swimming upstream from there. So it's nice to not only for yourself to have that information prepared for your loved ones, but for your loved ones to kind of be thinking through that. So you mentioned that I know there's like 5 steps that they kind of cover. So let's just kind of start with the first step, which is starting a conversation, which can be difficult.
It can be extremely difficult, and it's finding that right time to start that conversation. I remember with my father, to start the conversation, my father came to my house one day, and he said that he had 2 cars, and he said, okay, now, which car do you want? So something happened to me, so that was an easy conversation to start with. But oftentimes, as I said, people say, I don't want to have this conversation because I don't want to talk about my parents passing. But that conversation needs to start, even with young people.
Yes.
Because young people are needing to be cared for. So it's just finding the right time, the right place to start that conversation. And sometimes it just simply starts with the individual, me as an individual, saying to my loved one, I was thinking about doing some planning for the future. You know, have you done that? Or can you give me some idea of how I can do that?
That's a great way.
Yes.
That's great. I've also heard people suggest, we know such and such recently had to be placed, and I just watched them go through all of that. You know, have you thought about anything like that? You know, so there's different ways to approach it. If you can't find it in your own way, if maybe mentioning somebody who's been through it and use them as an example too.
Or someone who simply, sometimes individuals will take the advice from someone else besides their loved one.
Yes.
And I jokingly said to a lady in the class one day, she said, my mom is not going to listen to anyone. So I said, go back and tell your mom that Miss Angie said you're ready to start this conversation.
Sure.
And she said, that's a good idea. She said, I'm going to tell my mother. That's how I'm going to introduce the fact that I had this course and that Miss Angie told me that we need to have this conversation. So
That's
I said,
wonderful.
that's okay.
That's wonderful. So who else should be part of the conversation? It
varies per individual, but it definitely should. If it's a parent, who should be a part of that? The children should be a part of that. Your loved one, any of your loved ones that are involved in your day-to-day activities should be a part of that conversation, because first and foremost, you're going to document the things that are needed.
Okay.
And so that once you document those things that are needed, then you can say to those individuals, the loved ones, the neighbor, the church member, or whoever wants to be involved, you can say, this is what's needed, and then from there, the second step is building a team. And it helps you in building that team, that you are getting individuals that really want to help provide this support, and you have something that they're tagged to and responsible for. My girlfriend was responsible for, Vicki was responsible for calling my mother and saying, Miss Swann, have you been to the mailbox today? To help her that was her way of getting exercise. So Vicki became that person that simply called on the phone to talk to my mother and be a part of it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that needs to be an individual that's seeing them every day, but it can simply be a phone call.
Okay, and it doesn't mean it has to be a family member either.
Right, exactly.
Okay, all right. Now, you mentioned some, like a checklist or something like that, some things that you need to kind of go through. When people come to the training, they get a booklet, correct?
Yes, you get a booklet.
And it kind of covers all of that. Like, you could kind of have like a beginning care plan as you start. So some of this information we're going over, they'll actually be able to walk away with. They'll
actually be able, and in fact, I brought a copy of this book, which is something that we have, and it's a booklet that everyone will get a copy of this booklet that they can use, and it has all of the information
great.
That's available. Yes.
Wonderful. So speaking of making a plan, one of my favorite quotes is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And quite often when I work with caregivers, that seems to be the problem, is that they haven't had the courage to think ahead. And so when we say a caregiver plan, what exactly does that mean?
When we're talking about a plan, that conversation that we just had, and we're talking about building that team, it's actually, the plan is, and I say too that, along with what you've said, that a plan is something that's documented. Versus if it's just a plan, it's in your head, it's just a dream, it's a wish list. But if that plan is documented, then everybody gets a copy of that document. Everybody that needs to get a copy will get a copy of that document, and so that you can keep up with who's responsible for what. And we give you some ideas of some things that you can document and maintain in that plan. Okay,
and what are some of those examples that they give?
Examples of things that we give are, for example, health power of attorney, so that you know that you have that health power of attorney. The will, that you have copies of that. But again, back to the health power of attorney, when you're talking about caring, sometimes when individuals have to go to the hospital, someone has to make some decisions. And it's important that someone have a power of attorney, a health power of attorney for you, and other power of attorney documents as well. But that health power of attorney gives the individual the opportunity to make decisions for you when you're not able to make those decisions.
Right,
Yes.
right, absolutely, which is a very important document that many people need to have.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. The other part of this, or the next step in the plan, is to find support. So could you give some examples of support caregivers might need throughout their journey?
And this part, when it talks about finding support, it talks about finding some professional support.
Okay.
It could very well be, it's of course it is your physician, but it could be an organization like your organization, finding that support to help with you, and having a place that when the caregiver can't be full-time or is not available, finding some resources. Finding a resource that maybe even comes into your home that will help you. So that's in addition to the friends and family and church, but finding those professionals that can come in and help provide some support as well.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of government support.
Yes.
But with any government program, there's a waiting list.
Yes.
And quite often we get calls from caregivers who are in crisis, or they're being discharged from rehab or whatever, and now they're needing support, and we're saying, 9 months. The list does move, you will eventually get support. So I like how you're looking ahead for those supports.
Yes.
Just seeing what your community has to offer, because maybe the community isn't the right fit, and maybe I'll need to look at the next step. So when things start to get to here, maybe we need to do that. But I think it's really important that caregivers think about about supports that their individual need. Does it also mean like supports the caregiver might need, like just mental health wise?
The support that the care is definitely a part of it. We talk about in this plan that one of the steps is caring for yourself. It's difficult to care for someone else when you're not caring for yourself. When you're not okay, if you will, if I can use that term. So the caregiver finding some, be it respite care, through those facilities, or the caregiver just simply finding what is something that I can do to help me. Maybe it means that you get out and do some exercise. Maybe it means just asking a neighbor to come and sit with you while you get out and go to the grocery store, or just taking some time for yourself.
Sure.
But that caregiver, there's a plan that really included in that plan. What is the caregiver going to do to help themselves as well? Yes,
because quite often I see caregivers, I find anyway at the center, the main reason why people are placed is because the caregiver just runs out of energy. Like they're just so overwhelmed that they can't really see their way through whatever the next step might be. I know at the center we offer, and when I say center, the Leaf Center, we offer support groups for people who are just generally caregiving, or caregiving for somebody who has a memory impairment, or somebody who has traumatic brain injury, to help kind of reach them and find them or how do you refer, a team of people that they can call on. A lot of them have become friends, and they meet with each other outside of just the support group. But it definitely helps to talk to people who are kind of going through the same thing you're going through as well.
And having that support group that, like you said, you're having that conversation, and then it makes you feel good that I'm not the only one that's going through this. I'm not alone in this.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not alone in doing that.
Right.
And that's one of the things that recently AARP does have, a caregiver group on Facebook.
Oh, really?
That individuals. I just joined it not too long ago, and you can actually, if there's not a support group in your community, you can go to that group and actually ask some of the questions. Individuals are asking questions, and caregivers that are on that group are answering those questions and helping and providing that information.
That's wonderful. I know when my mom had a traumatic brain injury, she wasn't able to get out of the house, and so she went online for support, and she still, it's been 3-4 years now, and she still logs on, maybe not as frequently as she used to, but every once in a while she starts thinking, am I still normal? Is you know, and then she logs on. She goes, okay, what I'm experiencing is normal and typical, and I need to just relax a little bit through that, or maybe I do need to call my doctor and ask a question or two. So I think that's I think it's valuable that you can find resources online as well as in your community as well. So, and then the last one we kind of talked about is caring for yourself. Very important. Exercise is really important as well, getting out. We had a lady who, her and her husband was taking care of her mother, and they moved in with her, and she pretty much needed 24-hour support. And so one would take nights, one would take days, and I was like, they'll never be able to make it. And they did. I was so surprised, but the reason why they made it is they really prioritize their health. And so they would drop her off at the center, and then they would go walk a couple miles, and that gave them time together, and they, so where they could still have a relationship, and then also for their health. And she said if it was raining, they find some place to go, but it seemed to really make a difference. Just caring for themselves, realizing that they couldn't do that. If they couldn't continue to care for their mother if they didn't care for themselves. So very important.
Yeah, and one of the terms that I like too is the term fly where you first love yourself.
Yes.
And even if it means that you just simply, one of the things that I mentioned that I really love doing is journaling. So taking the time to get it out of your head and getting it on paper, so that you're taking the time to actually think about what's going on, documenting your feelings, or documenting what happened today, what happened to your loved one today, and that really helps too.
Sure,
really
absolutely.
Helps. Or writing letters. I love writing letters. You talk about note to self, or writing letters to yourself. But just taking the time, just some time for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we talked about, so they get the book when they leave. So is the goal for them to have like a plan in place, or to have the outlook of the plan, or a layout of the plan? Like, what's the goal? What's the takeaway? The main takeaway of the workshop?
The main takeaway is, first and foremost, is that you really are starting the conversation. It's starting the conversation with yourself. It's starting your conversation with your loved one, getting people to start to think about earlier, to think about before that crisis occurs and everybody's running around and trying to find some things. But the takeaway is to give you some structure.
Okay.
The steps that we go through, the 5 steps that we go through, giving you their resources that are found in the book. And as I said, there are examples of things that you can look for in terms of your finances, in terms of physically where you need help, all kinds of information checklists that are contained in the booklet that you can go through, and will help you identify some of the things that you need to put in your plan, some of the things that you need to put together.
Okay, wonderful. And how long is the workshop?
The workshop is basically a 30-minute presentation, but that 30-minute presentation includes conversation, back and forth conversation, and so normally the workshop ends up being about an hour.
Okay. Yes, I know we're going to offer lunch afterwards, because everybody loves to eat.
Yes.
Most definitely. So what are some, now you've been teaching this for some time.
Yes, I have.
So what are some things that you have seen caregivers be able to do with this workshop for the betterment of their selves and for the individual they're caring for? The workshop has helped, many individuals have said to me that it's really helped them in terms of that they're pulling a recent workshop that I did. There was a wife in the workshop, and she said, I'm going to take this information so that my husband and I can go home and sit down and start putting our information together. Not for mom and dad, but for them personally, that people are beginning to realize that this is something that you need to do for yourself, that people are starting to do that. And it gives them the opportunity, okay, I'm getting some tips, I'm getting some information that I can now go back and sit down and talk to my mom and dad. I can share this booklet with my brother or my sister who doesn't want to, the brother or the sister. One gentleman said to me, my brother does not want to talk about this at all. And he said, I'm going to sit down and show him this book.
and so that we can get started on that conversation.
Right.
You know, and doing that. So a lot of good feedback.
Wonderful, wonderful. So if somebody wants to register, they will contact myself at the Leaf Center, Ashley Cooper, at 336-347-2328. That's 347-2328. There's also a link, I believe, that they can go through AARP and sign up as well, and so we will post that as well. Is there anything else that you can think of that we didn't cover?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Again, it's just getting people to recognize that this isn't something that we're talking about an end of life type guide.
Right.
This is something that, as I said, you know, I broke my foot this year. So plan in terms of individuals caring for me. Things happen that we just aren't aware of, and maybe it's not something major, but whatever, you want to start that conversation so that your loved one can be involved too, so you don't want to wait until they're not able to contribute to that conversation. But you want to get as many people involved, because caregiving is one of the most difficult things in life that we will ever have to do. And so preparing for that, what better way than to be prepared for that?
Right. What most loving act that you can do?
Yes.
Most definitely.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Angie. I appreciate it. And I look forward to our Prepare to Care workshop, which is next Friday, the 27th. And again, if you'd like to register, you can contact myself, Ashley Cooper, at 336-347-2328. But that wraps up everything we have time for today. And if you'd like to have more information about any services that ADTS provides, please contact us at 349-2343, 349-2343. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to having you back.